Back in the late 2010s, there was one name you couldn't really escape on YouTube: Ricegum. He was everywhere. Millions of views, constant drama, diss tracks, and a level of attention most creators never even come close to. But what's interesting is how quickly that changed. One day he was the center of everything happening on YouTube, and over time, he just wasn't. No huge cancellation moment, no single event that ended it, just a slow disappearance from the platform he once dominated. So in this video, I'm gonna break down exactly what happened, how he rose, why he was everywhere, and how one of the biggest names in YouTube drama slowly became part of internet history. At his peak, Ricegum wasn't just another creator on YouTube. He was one of the faces of an entire era. Back then, YouTube wasn't dominated by short-form content or polished entertainment like it is now. It was chaotic. Drama channels were exploding, reaction videos were everywhere, and diss tracks had somehow became a full-blown trend on the platform. And Ricegum came right in the middle of that. He built his audience through roast-style content, reacting to other creators, calling people out, and turning online arguments into entertainment. At this time, the formula worked extremely well, because the more controversial something was, the more attention it got. And that attention started stacking up fast. Millions of views became normal for him. Every upload felt like it was automatically going viral. And the more people that talked about him, the bigger his name got across the entire platform. At one point, it wasn't even just about videos anymore. It was an entire ecosystem around him. Other creators would respond to him, drama channels would break down everything he did, fans would take sides. And suddenly, he wasn't just a YouTuber anymore. He was a central figure in YouTube drama culture. That era also came with a lot of lifestyle content around him. Flexing money, houses, cars, all of that started becoming part of the image. And whether people liked him or hated him, everyone was still watching, which on YouTube is basically the same thing as winning. But what makes this era interesting in hindsight is that it wasn't built to last. The same type of content that made him huge was also tied to the very specific moment in YouTube history. A moment where drama was rewarded more than almost anything else. And when that moment started to fade, everything around it started to change too. At a certain point, the rise turned into something bigger. Ricegum wasn't just growing anymore, he was the center of everything. His videos were pulling millions of views consistently. Diss tracks weren't just content anymore, they were events. When he dropped a video, it didn't just get watched, it got reacted to, responded to, and broken down across the entire platform. And that's what made this era so different. YouTube drama at this time wasn't just background noise, it was the content. Entire channels existed just to cover what he was doing next. At his peak, it felt like he had complete control over attention. If you were in that space, you couldn't ignore him. Even people who didn't like his content were still watching, just to see what would happen next. And with that attention came the lifestyle side too. The money, the flexing, the houses, the cars. It all became part of the image. But more importantly, it reinforced the idea that this wasn't just a creator anymore. It was someone who had figured out how to dominate YouTube in that specific moment in time. But what nobody really talks about is that moments like this on YouTube don't really last forever. Because when a platform changes, the people who built their success on the old version of it often change with it too. And slowly, that's exactly what started happening. Everything still looked the same from the outside. Views were still coming in, his name was still recognizable, and the audience hadn't fully moved on yet. The kind of content that built Ricegum started to lose its place on the platform. YouTube itself was shifting. Drama content wasn't disappearing, but it wasn't dominating the same way it used to. New formats were taking over. Shorter attention spans, faster trends, and algorithms that rewarded consistency over controversy. And that changed everything. Because the entire world he came up in was built on attention staying in one place long enough for drama to develop. But now, attention moved faster than ever. And when attention moves faster than you can keep up with, you start to fall behind without even realizing it. Diss tracks didn't hit the same way. drama cycles ended quicker, and audiences that used to stay locked into creators' beefs started moving on after a single video, and slowly, the center of that world started shifting away from him. It wasn't a moment where everything collapsed at once. It was more like one day he wasn't the main topic anymore. Then another creator was, and then another, and then another, until eventually he just wasn't part of the conversation in the same way. And that's what makes this turning point so important, because nothing really ended his career in a single moment. It was the platform evolving, and the audience evolving with it. And in that transition, the people who were built for the old version of YouTube slowly started to fade out of the spotlight. And once that shift fully happened, the change wasn't loud. It didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, almost quiet. Uploads started slowing down. At one point where consistency used to keep him in the conversation, now even posting wasn't enough to bring him to the same level of attention. And when the videos did come out, they weren't treated the same way anymore. The platform had moved on, and more importantly, the audience had moved on too. Not because people suddenly hated him, but because there was just more content now, more creators, more trends, more everything happening at once. And in that kind of environment, attention doesn't disappear, it just gets redistributed. And once it moves on somewhere else, it rarely comes back in the same way. So what used to feel like being at the center of everything slowly turned into something else, being remembered instead of being watched. And that's usually the point where people assume a creator just fell off. But in reality, it's more complicated than that. In Ricegum's case, it wasn't one controversy, it wasn't one video, and it wasn't one moment that ended everything. It was the absence of momentum, the absence of consistent attention, the absence of being part of whatever was happening in real time on the platform. And once that happens, it becomes very hard to get back into the same position, because YouTube doesn't really wait for anyone anymore. New creators don't just appear slowly over time, they explode into relevancy instantly. And that speed makes it almost impossible for older waves of creators to naturally re-enter the spotlight. So even if the name is still known, and even if the audience still remembers them, the attention is already somewhere else. And that's where Ricegum ended up. Not gone, but no longer part of the main conversation. And that's what makes his situation interesting, because it really wasn't a downfall in a traditional sense. It was more like the version of YouTube that made him huge simply stopped existing. And today, Ricegum still exists on this platform. He still uploads from time to time, but it's no longer the same. The numbers aren't what they used to be. The impact isn't what it used to be. And more importantly, he's no longer shaping what happens on YouTube. At one point, his content felt like it was driving the conversation. Now, it feels like he exists outside of it, and that difference is everything. But what makes his story interesting isn't just what happened to him, it's what it says about YouTube as a whole. Because this isn't just one creator fading out, this is what happens when an entire era ends. The drama era, the diss tracks, the long-running creator feuds. All of that used to dominate the platform, and now it's mostly gone, replaced by faster content, shorter trends, and a system where attention moves quicker than ever before. And in a system like that, being on top isn't permanent. It's temporary, and eventually, everyone gets replaced. So, when people ask, what happened to Ricegum, the answer isn't as simple as him falling off. It's that the version of YouTube he mastered doesn't really exist anymore. And once that disappeared, so did the version of him that thrived on it. And maybe the real question isn't what happened to him, but how many other creators are heading in the exact same direction without even realizing it. Because on YouTube, it's not always about who's the biggest, it's about who fits the moment. And once that moment passes, so does everything that came with it.